been hearing from Greg Cox. He was with the Travis County District Attorney's Office for decades, actually, talking about, this decision about how they were trying to decide whether or not to investigate, trying to take on an investigation of Ken Paxton, and they were ultimately basically got word from the feds that they should not. And so, as far as we know, and even based on the testimony we heard from Missy Carr, there's been a federal grand jury investigation into these matters. Your thoughts, Berna Dean?
Well, and also answers why it has taken so long and we have not seen the federal government or the feds indict suspended AG Paxton. But you know what? Also, if you're listening to the evidence and you're listening to it in more of an objective way, you can understand why the House impeached him, and you can understand why the whistleblowers went to the law enforcement, because it's clear from this evidence that AG Paxton was involved in a lot of things. Now, potentially illegal, because remember, he has to have his day in court, and then also unethically, also, well, I don't want to talk about the moral because that's subjective, but it's clear why that we're here today.
Well, and it's, I think that a lot of the testimony we've heard has just been really troubling in terms of just how the office was, and just systematically, I don't think I've ever heard descriptions of how an office has been this systematically used on behalf of one individual. And it was interesting because Missy Carr, she was clearly kind of devastated by this. I mean, it really looked like she really took it hard. What happened? She was not, she was his chief of staff. This is not someone who probably ever thought that she would be speaking like this publicly, having to testify at an impeachment trial. I don't think she would be that kind of individual. And you can see the senators listening to her testimony and just what she had to say. And it was interesting to me that they chose to have her walk through kind of the timeline and the chronology of how this went down. And I think they wanted someone who was not one of the whistleblowers. And then basically it sounds like she just retired in frustration and just said, I need to retire.
Well, and that's why she was not technically a whistleblower. You know what, I think that what was so impactful was when she said, I just gave up. She just got tired. And I think that watching and listening and seeing some of the things that Ken Paxton did, she just became frustrated and saddened. And then also the testimony that she gave when she had to talk with Senator Angela Paxton. She apparently was very fond of both of them, and she just hated to have gone through what she did. But here's something else too, but especially in the political arena, that if some of the viewers and the Paxton supporters, if they actually want to know what's going on, if whatever possible, they need to look at the testimony. Because if you look at what the liberals are doing, writing on social media, if you're looking at what the Paxton supporters are doing, writing on social media, it's as if they're not even at the trial. Because if we go back to this, they're putting out what they want to put out. And it's just really interesting, but as we've said all along, it's a political trial. And we just have to understand whether or not these senators want to put him out of office, but how can you not? And keep something else in mind, Tanya. A great number of these senators are attorneys. They understand this evidence. Right. They understand it. Now, whether we go back to whether or not how are they going to justify it? Because my understanding of what I have been watching, these whistleblowers, these witnesses have not been impeached. Their credibility has not been put online where they cannot believe what they're saying.
Well, it's hard to understand why all these people who are appointed, chosen and hand-selected by Ken Paxton, why do they all suddenly decide we want to blow up our careers to do this? It doesn't make any sense. And that's why I always just keep kind of going back to the whole Occam's razor thing. I mean, it was just such a term that I heard a few years, about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And just, there's no reason, it doesn't make sense why these people, because these were people that had reached, the pinnacle of their positions at the AG's office. In a number of cases, they had left other jobs to go work at the AG's office. They have nothing to gain by this. They have absolutely nothing to gain.
I'm sorry, I thought you had finished.
You go ahead.
You know who's mind-boggling to me? Maxwell. Why would he fire him? Why would he fire someone who's so very much respected that it smacks of someone who's just out of control, or someone who just wants to get this done in such a way that he was willing to fire someone who was so well respected? Right. It all boils down now, and you know also they wanted to, this is one of the first times that they brought up or either talked about how they recognized and pinpointed the mistress. But it's just, and also, let me tell you something else.
Sure, Berna Dean.
Missy, when she talked about the money, see, remember when earlier testimony talked about, or cross-examination or whatever talked about how you're going to pay this outside counsel.
Right.
She said he'd have the authority to do it. As long as it didn't go through that process, he couldn't use the money. And I think that was very telling as well. Today had very good testimony in the sense that we heard things that we have not heard.
Well, and Busby confirming for a fact that Brandon Kamek, in fact, never got paid.
Yes.
I mean, if the contract is lawful, if everything is on the up and up, why doesn't he get paid? I mean, if everything's good to go, why? I mean, the guy did work, so why didn't the AG's office pay him? I'd like to hear that explanation.
Well, according to Missy, he legally or according to policy, he couldn't.
Right, and I'm certainly not an expert in that arena, but I would like to know a bit more about the reason why. Because again, if everything is on the up and up, as Ken Paxton side is saying, and that he had the authority to do it, and everything was done as it should have been, then why wasn't Brandon Kamek paid? I'd like to hear that explanation. I mean, and nobody's explained that to me yet.
Very good question.
It is, and now one spot where they did kind of get Missy was this question of where was this conference. I mean, I don't know if she misspoke about the location. I mean, because Busby did get her a bit on whether or not it was in San Antonio, but I didn't get the sense that it wasn't that it didn't happen. It was just maybe she was mistaken. I mean, I don't know about you, but my memory for something that happened 3 or 4 years ago is going to be, I might misremember a location, but she very clearly remembered that she had seen her at this conference and that she saw the name tag.
And that's what stood out to me, not necessarily where it was. We do know it was out of Austin. It wasn't inside Austin, and it was at, he did bring out when he said that, it wasn't there. That wasn't the conference. But by then, we had heard the other testimony that the location didn't necessarily matter. But again, we go back to that dog whistling. See, he says things that they can put on social media, that they can say she wasn't even factual as to where it happened. But that does not take away the substance of the testimony.
Well, the substance of what we've seen that they've testified to has largely held up. I mean, all of these witnesses have largely testified to the same chronology, to the same facts, and you just cannot say it too many times. These were Ken Paxton's people. These are all conservative people. These are people that he hired, he chose, and of course, in the case of Mateer and one of the other guys, they're both working for very conservative organizations that push for conservative causes, and that certainly that's so it's not to this. These are not rhinos. These are not. Nobody has come up with a reasonable explanation why they would blow up their careers to do this. The only explanation seems to be, at this point, what they say it was, that they believed that Ken Paxton had stepped over the ethical, moral lines. I mean, the descriptions that Penley gave about, what he thought here, that this was not, that this was, I'm going back into my notes, he called it insane. And he called it, this guy, absolute, his words were the idea that the Attorney General would want them to do this was absolute craziness. And then you have the Attorney General, who is the state's top law officer, expressing over and over his distrust of law enforcement. And I get back to it. It's not to say that I would think that law enforcement is perfect, but there's nothing that was given that explains a reasonable explanation why you would want to launch this huge investigation that Nate Paul wants. I mean, investigations of multiple federal judges, a bankruptcy judge, a federal magistrate, a clerk in the magistrate's office, prosecutors, investigators, a board member of the Texas State Securities Board. I mean, apparently everybody apparently was out to get Nate Paul, and Ken Paxton was going to make sure it didn't happen. I mean, it's just hard to grasp.
Well, and then it really doesn't make sense. It appears as if you have this out of control, desperate AG wanting to save a potential alleged criminal. The only explanation that I think Mateer said is that it goes back to this affair. And you have to wonder, though, why would Paxton put himself in this position? Is it because he's gotten away with so much so long? Remember, he hasn't gone to trial yet.
No.
So, you just have to wonder what frame of mind this AG is in. And then which begs another consideration that these senators have to come to or have to consider. Do we want to keep this politician in office? And you have these career attorneys who he hired who are saying that he's in essence out of control. He's desperate. He has his own agenda. And his agenda is not to take care of the business of taxpayers. So that's something that these senators, they just have to weigh. Do we want to keep him in office, or do we want to take this opportunity, which is what the state representatives have tasked them to do, is to make a decision as to whether or not you want to keep this attorney general. And if you look at the evidence, he's no longer qualified, not mentally, not legally, because he's sort of ignoring the legal process. So do they want to keep him? And also, Tanya, do his supporters have the power to influence these senators?
Oh, I mean, look, this is inherently a political process. I mean, you can't have a situation like this where you have jurors that are state senators, and of course it's going to be political. I mean, look, I've covered many criminal trials, and normally in a criminal trial, you would not have the jurors voting on motions beforehand, which is what we saw on day one. So this is all you cannot separate the politics from this, but it's kind of a quasi situation where you have the presiding judge, who is not a lawyer, although it kind of feels like that Dan Patrick has kind of gotten his sea legs a little bit.
And he's trying. But if you look at the evidence and you believe the evidence and there is no conviction, you can only say it's because it's the politics. That's why I say if you believe the evidence and you're watching and listening to the trial, the only explanation that you come to is they wanted to keep their elected official in office. Which comes to another point, Tanya. How long do you want? Because there is no evidence to show that Paxton is going to stop doing what he's doing. There's no evidence to show that he backed off from it. Matter of fact, he told different stories and continued to do what he wanted to do. So do they want to keep that type of elected official in office?
Well, I don't know. I think we're going to probably find out this week, probably just based on what Dan Patrick said this morning. It's looking like testimony will probably wrap Wednesday. I mean, you know, this morning, I wrote this down this morning, as of 9 a.m. this morning, the House impeachment managers had 14 hours and 28 minutes and 17 seconds. They had it down to the second. And Paxton's team had 14 hours, 23 minutes, and 17 seconds. So, I don't know. So they, you know, at the end of the day, if they go to 6:30 or 7 with breaks and everything, I mean, we're probably down to 7 hours each left. I mean, I'm just ballparking it. I mean, so I don't see how you go much more. It feels like tomorrow you would be at the end of evidence, right? I mean, I can't see how it goes much more than tomorrow. And then probably closings on Wednesday. I mean, I'm looking at a timeline. I mean, this is not a traditional trial. In most trials I've actually covered, I mean, there can be limitations put, but not like this. I mean, in a traditional trial, pretty much you get to keep going as long as necessary. I mean, I've heard judges tell attorneys to, you know, pick it up a bit, move it along, that kind of thing if the attorneys are getting out of hand. And you know, generally you'll have time limitations on an opening or a closing, but but this is a very tight timeline, and I just wonder how many more witnesses does the prosecution want to call, and do they feel like they've done enough? You know, we haven't even gotten into this question of the renovations. You know, they've promised, the House impeachment managers have promised the Senate jurors that they're going to show that Nate Paul paid for these renovations, and we have not seen that yet.
Well, we might be at the end of this trial by the weekend.
Oh, I think it'll be before. I think Berna Dean. I think it'll be before that. I mean, do you see the senators debating that long? I mean, I don't know. Of course, you know, I'm always wrong on deliberations. I'm always wrong on outcomes. I have no idea.
But keep in mind, you're going to have 30 politicians in one room.
But there's no cameras. No cameras in that room. So there's no cameras to play to.
I understand, but what is it? 6 senators who have consistently voted not to impeach him?
Right.
So they must convince the others. At least they have to convince 3, 4 more? 4 more Republicans? So, hey, we don't know, as you say. And remember, politicians can grandstand. They can talk a lot. They can do whatever they want to. So I think that's the question. How long it's going to take the senators to go in and hash out their next because keep in mind, too, once they convict him, I'm sure that they're going to know.
Well, now we don't know that they're going to convict him.
Well, thank you for correcting me. Oh God, let's
be careful here because I'm not taking any sides. So.
I'm not either. As I said, if you're looking at this evidence, you tend to move in that direction. But I am not going to speculate as to how they're going to vote or how they're going to rule. So I thank you for correcting me on that. But if they acquit or they convict, they still have to decide on whether or not they're going to remove him and not allow him to run again. That's another discussion.
You know, the other thing I want to know, I think that would be very interesting is if I was a senator, I would want to watch those interviews with Nate Paul because I've seen all of the first one and a good bit of the second one. They were pretty lengthy. And Nate Paul, in those interviews with David Maxwell and Mark Penley, could not explain. It was just a series of non sequiturs. He couldn't really explain why his belief that all these law enforcement officials are going to ruin their careers to go do this. I mean, his claim that the affidavit had been altered, and of course they looked at the metadata, and couldn't find any evidence of it. Now, of course, you know, Penley said they would have had to go and get the U.S. Attorney's computer, and anybody that knows anything about law enforcement knows that's not going to happen. But the idea that a federal magistrate judge, a bankruptcy judge, that all these people are going to be involved in some sort of misconduct related to Nate Paul doesn't make sense. But I think the senators, they need to watch those interviews, because if you watch those interviews, you will understand why David Maxwell and Mark Penley didn't put much stock in anything that Nate Paul had to say. And furthermore, they really need to listen to the audio of Brandon Kamek and the attorney representing Nate Paul going to deliver subpoenas on these couple of banks. I listened to them myself. I have never heard of such a thing. First of all, like Penley said, no, that wasn't, was it Penley or was it?
One of them.
One of them said, I can't remember which one, there's been a lot of testimony. One of them said it was either Penley or, I think it was Penley. No, it was Penley. Said that, that this would be very uncommon for, and practically unheard of for the prosecutor to go deliver the subpoenas. You would normally have a deputy, or if it was the feds, it'd be like a deputy, you know, marshal or something like that. It would not be the prosecutor themselves, and you most certainly would not have an attorney representing a party involved in a civil matter related to this person along with you to deliver the subpoenas. Like, that just wouldn't happen. So that shows a level of cooperation between between Brandon Kamek and Nate Paul's attorney that doesn't make any sense.
Well, but keep in mind, to them, it didn't have to make sense because they were convinced that Ken Paxton would get it done. So why do you have to have the evidence? Why do you have to show your case when you have the Attorney General supporting what you're saying, and that he's probably convincing them and telling them, hey, we'll get this done. We don't need to do this. And if you believe the testimony, he was actively trying to get done what Nate Paul thought he could do. Right. So I'm sure that they didn't even think about, okay, we need to do this, because one of the whistleblowers said that, was it Finley? Well, one of them said that we consistently tried to get evidence. We consistently kept trying to get.
Right, Penley was talking about how they tried, he kept calling Wynn, I can't remember the guy's first name, but kept calling Wynn and saying, hey, provide us this evidence. And they did give them the thumb drive with this metadata, and they, you know, had their forensic people look at it and determined that it didn't prove what Nate Paul claimed it proved. And then he kept calling him. He described over and over and over, leaving voicemail messages and trying to get Wynn to give him this evidence or whatever, some additional documentation that he had gotten, and he never gave it. And then when he talked to, later on when he talked to Ken Paxton about it, Paxton said, Penley recounted that the reason that Wynn didn't want to hand this additional stuff over was because, well, he was I'm paraphrasing here, he was too tight with David Maxwell. And so, okay, so Dan Patrick is back on the dais, and let's
please
take
bring
a
in the
listen.
witness.